flickering lights. I would just like to confirm before I proceed, are lights flickering or am I having a brain tumor?
They are flickering.
Okay. And no, I will not share why Dan and I were laughing. Dan and I, first of all, you have very few friends in life. And I think the definition of a true, real close friend is somebody you can say something to, and it goes no further, period. So I understand the fascination. They were a radio station. We just had to be talking about something, little medical thing, nothing big. And it was just the kind of thing that an older brother would have an obvious solution for that a younger brother who has never dealt with it has ever really thought of.
Yeah.
And so we're in this conversation, and then right from one breath to the next, he goes, Super Talk 99. And so I used to do that to my co-host all the time. I go, this station sucks. I don't even want to work here. 7:22 in the morning, and I turn my mic on. It just had that effect, and it made us laugh. But it was nothing embarrassing, nothing serious. It was actually really a cute older brother, younger brother moment. Anyway, at 9:06, we have sunshine in Brentwood, 65 degrees, 62 cooler to the north in Hendersonville. Downtown on Music Row, our statues are naked. Skies are fair, 66 degrees. It feels like 66. The market is down, but not much. The Dow's down 38, but still in that 32,600 range. It was just a couple of weeks ago. We were in the 34,000 range. So some of you have taken a hit. It's not permanent unless you sold. But Joe's nurse, through Joe's economic policies, is doing things I've never seen a nurse do to my portfolio, okay? Dow's down. I had one listener go, I think I know what she whispered in his ear.
Oh, yes.
Shank shoe.
I was thinking about that all morning.
I went, at least I was mature. I went from popcorn, or corn pop it was, right?
Yeah, corn pop.
I went from corn pop to, I bet she said shank shoe. Yeah. To, I got to tell you a story about an ultrasound I had one time. Anyway, Dow's down 37 at 32,619. NASDAQ's down 51. The S&P's down 17. All three are in the red, but the market is basically flat. I'm Michael DelGiorno for Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. I have been a customer of Efficient. I have done maintenance twice a year. I have had my bouts with emergency repair. And then, of course, I've replaced, I think, 3 or 4 units total. With Jeff. And it's funny because the award they got from Ream as an Elite Pro partner describes what I've enjoyed for 14 years. The highest level of year-round comfort and security. Expertise, immediate response, permanent solutions, affordability. These are all the reasons why when it comes to maintenance, repair, or replacement, I've looked nowhere else for 14 years. And if you've got tough decisions or if you've had frustrating customer relations, these are the guys for you. They do residential, light commercial service, all brands, all technologies. As I mentioned, an Elite Pro partner with Ream, a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi, an A+ rated for all. Whether it's maintenance, repair, or replacement, all year long, trust who I trust. Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. 784-4424. 784-4424. Online at efficienthvac.net.
Information fueled, opinion driven. This is the Michael DelGiorno Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I can't catch a break. Now I got somebody saying, well, what happened with the ultrasound?
Inquiring minds want to know.
You really want to? I really want to start with Joe Biden. I really want to start with a execution-style murder in St. Louis of a homeless person. I want to get to the election results in Chicago. I mean, there's so much, but I'll do it. So I was having a panic attack, and I knew I was having a panic attack. Now, I will admit to everybody, panic attacks feel just like a heart attack. So I call my doctor, and I go, I don't have any Xanax. I haven't had a need for a Xanax in 5 years, but I'm having a panic attack. You got to do something. Can I come by? And he goes, Michael, you're whatever I was, 39, 40 years old. You smoke. I got to send you to the emergency room. So I go to the emergency room. This guy's thoroughly convinced that I have clogged arteries, and I understand that. My dad's first angioplasty was in his, I think, around 40. He had a quintuplet bypass.
Wow.
In his early 50s. I mean, I get what doctors are doing. He's going, I'm telling you. And I'm telling this Italian, very handsome too, by the way. Ladies, this guy was like right out of casting. Handsome Italian guy. And I said, listen, Paisan, I'm telling you, this is a panic. He goes, Michael, I can't. Next thing you know, I'm getting an angiogram. He's inside me. It's not as bad as people think, and it's certainly not pleasant. He goes, we're going to feel a warm flush now. I'm going to shoot the dye into the first vein. So you feel the warm flush, right? He goes, I'm jawing this guy in the middle of an angiogram. I'm like, there's nothing, right? I can't believe this. Let me try the next artery. Oh, man. It's wide open, isn't it? Isn't it? I'm jawing him through this whole procedure. I can't believe the way you eat and the way you've smoked. And with your genetics, I can't believe these arteries are open. I said, listen, do you think when this is all over, I can get a Xanax? I mean, I was jawing him. He goes, I'm telling you something. I do this every day. I will be telling all my colleagues and my friends about this. I cannot believe I was certain you had blocked arteries. So, make a long story short, the procedure ends, and I develop a staph infection at the entrance in the groin.
Oh.
And that became nearly a death situation, which is a whole other long story. And no, I didn't sue, and I probably should have. But they thought I had a strangulated hernia, brought me into hernia surgery that ended, I'm not exaggerating, Andrew can give you the exact time, but I think I was asleep, apparently dying. But, they opened me up with staph infection. I mean, it's a miracle I didn't have septic. They couldn't get me to stop bleeding. The surgery lasted like 4 hours. I'll never forget, I had an MD doctor friend who said, well, let me put it to you this way. I don't think you're going to see your insurance company get billed. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
My entire hospital stay, it never got billed to my insurance company.
Huh.
I never saw a bill, and I certainly never sued, and I probably should have. But now I'm still dealing with this staph infection. So they send me for an ultrasound, and I can't tell you how big this ultrasound room was. It was kind of like we have studios in the building that are disproportionately big compared to ours. So we walk into them and go, what is this? How's this so big? Ours is a closet. But it was a giant room, and it was freezing. And there was nothing but this, shiny, sterling silver-like type table with nothing on it. I mean, not a bed, not with a cushion, not with a sheet.
Ominous.
It was just really bizarre. And the lady came in and put a thing of paper over the cold steel table. And she hands me what looks like a robe, but it was made of paper.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm going to need you to strip down completely naked, wear just this. So I remember, right away, childhood thoughts. This is all way too much information, but my brother used to tease me when I was very, very young and said, if you get a boner when the doctor is examining you, that means you're gay. And so then naturally, that's all I would think about.
You're doing like George Costanza.
Exactly. So I'm laying on this table and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got nothing but a thin, like a Kleenex, thin piece of paper cover me. And, don't get a boner. When in walks, and I don't mean this with any lust in my heart whatsoever, I'm talking physically the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. It's like, why is she doing ultrasounds and not an actress? I mean, she made Nicole Kidman look like the homely younger sister. And she just walks in this skirt suit, gorgeous.
Goodness.
With just the white coat over it. And then my mind is really, don't look at her. I'm trying to think of every disgusting thing on earth. You almost died.
Yeah.
Remember when your dog died? Ponder holding him as the life left him. I'm trying to do everything. And then all of a sudden, she moves my little piece of paper. And then she goes, this is going to feel a little cold. And then she's moving this cold, lube ball in that area. And I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Goodness.
That is my, and then I'm reading this story with Joe Biden. Now, with Joe Biden, the first thing is, there's several things to process, right? Number one, did this really even happen?
Yeah. Yep.
The way was there an incident with a guy named Corn Pop? Maybe. But were they really sharpening blades on the sidewalk that they soak in water to get rusty for, knife fights? And they were outside the pool dangling them on the sidewalk, getting ready to carve him up because he called them Esther Williams. I'm beginning to wonder. Could be crossing in the Switchblade, could be West Side Story. Joe doesn't even know anymore. Why is he rambling about this? Because this is what people in nursing homes do, only you made this guy president. So, you never know what is true when he speaks, but the president, of course, is trying to appreciate nurses, which is laughable, right? Because with the whole COVID debacle, and we could go round and round, Nurses were the frontline heroes to be worshipped, just like the firemen coming out of 9/11. And then when they wouldn't be manipulated and get their vaccines, they were thrown and shown the door and thrown out. I mean, really, this president's party and those that bought into the narratives of COVID versus the truth of COVID use these people as a pawn. Now he's trying to build them up as the greatest thing on earth to be worshipped and loved by all. But he launches into a story about his old nurse named Pearl.
Ugh.
And it gets creepy of corn pop epic proportion. I had a nurse named Pearl. I had to stop right there and just picture a pearl, didn't you, for a second? Can you imagine? Now, do we really think Joe Biden, the same Joe Biden, he goes, America can be explained in one word. And it goes on and on. He can't think of the word. But he can remember Pearl Nelson like it's yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, oh, wow, this must have been quite the encounter. I mean, even when I do Shang Shu, which if you're just joining us, I had a masseuse for many, many years, and then he moved or went out of business, and so I was in bad pain. So I walk into one of these Chinese places, and then I'm worried, is it going to be appropriate? I don't want to be a part of a raid. Michael DelGiorno. And just when I finally relax and go, hey, this place is legit. Nothing inappropriate is going to happen. So I started, relaxing in the massage. I'm like, oh, that feels good right there. And she leans over right into my ear and goes, Shang Shu.
Yeah.
And then I got creeped out again and started worrying again. So this is a Shang Shu moment for the president. But I mean, all the things he can't remember. He remembers Pearl Nelson by name.
Yeah.
I'm
Detail.
This is kind of like when you're on the roller coaster and you start going up. And you go, oh, this is going to be fun. Pearl Nelson, I'm ready. Hands in the air. Hope they take my picture. I had a nurse, Pearl Nelson. She came in and she would do things I don't think she learned in nursing school. And you're like, what? Where is this going? Now, in a nursing home, you sit back and relax and go, yeah, tell us about it, Joe. Because I learned that from the 90-year-old who taught me how to golf. We never grow up, ever.
No.
We're the same young person just trapped in an older body. And so when you're young, you dream about what you're going to do. When you're older, you dream about what you're doing and shouldn't be doing. And then when you get old, you dream about what you did or what you would do if you still could. So that's kind of how it goes. So old Joe's still Joe, right? And he wants to tell you about Pearl, but he's president of the United States. And this isn't the place to tell us about Pearl, who was doing things that she didn't learn in nursing school.
Come on, man.
She reminded me of Mary Magdalene. Yeah, that's who. And then he does the Shang Shu.
Oh.
She whispered in my ear. I couldn't understand her. But she'd whisper, she'd lean down, and she'd actually breathe on me. And I'm like, wow, what the hell is this? Can you imagine Reagan slipping into something like this? She's leaning on you. She's breathing. What is she saying in your ear? Is she doing the last verse of Rod Stewart's song? Was she speaking in French? Did she have hair under her arms? What the heck's going on? Did you draw a picture of her after the exam? And then he goes on to praise all nurses for their hospitality. It was just a bizarre corn pop moment.
Very.
But yes, I do appreciate my VIP listeners, my gold card listeners who know that means she leaned in and said, Shang Shu. Realizing, of course, he was getting somewhere creepy, the president immediately gets into his son who served in Iraq, had a brain tumor, and the nurses, and he bails, swims his way out of it. But I'm surprised there were no reporters after. Could we go back to Pearl? And
Exactly.
Please.
You don't have any recollection of what she was whispering in your ear? I think she said something like herd immunity. Oh, I just thought, I can't start my day that unprofessional. But then my consultation with Dan confirmed that I would start my day that unprofessional. What's the value of life? A man just nonchalantly, in broad daylight, on a street corner in St. Louis, loads his gun, and execution style just kills a homeless man sitting on the curb. This is America. Crime so out of control, such a failure for the left. Lightfoot is the first one out. We do have a runoff. It's between Ballas and Johnson in Chicago. I think that's a wave that will continue. A lot of people are still rumbling about, Credibility crisis. I love this headline in Fox. Credibility crisis. New York Times helped mislead America over COVID. Everybody bid on COVID. I love everybody that comes forward. There was a time I thought I was going crazy. That's how few of us were speaking the truth about COVID. But now we're going to lay it all in the New York Times. And this is the credibility crisis in the midst of the death of journalism. You think how they were misleading you over COVID is the totality of the problem? Gavin Newsom bashing Texas. California's a much better place, even though by the hundreds of thousands, they're leaving California for Texas. This is why I told you I am drooling for the DeSantis Gavin Newsom presidential race. If for no other reason, so we can compare California to Florida and the failed worldview and ideology of the left, a failed worldview that led to the Chicago mayor falling last night. And debt's piling up everywhere. It shows where we're headed. Everybody's living paycheck to paycheck. Credit cards are maxed out. Now car debt is piling up as more Americans head through inflation into recession. Ready for collapse, quite frankly. We'll put it all in perspective. We're going to go to the bullpen early just so we can buy a few more extra minutes with Chris Walker. All things Republican. With the GOP's Chris Walker, a new Trump poll suggesting Trump's finding his 2.0, and it's showing up in the polls. We'll start right there next.
Hey, it's Bel K from the Midday Show here on Super Talk. And before I found Awaken 180 Weight Loss, I never understood how much psychology goes into losing weight. I was speaking with my coach, Sam, and we were reviewing my numbers. I'd only lost about 2.5 pounds last week, not the normal 4 to 5 pounds per week that I'm aiming for. And she made some adjustments by adding in some fats and making some other tweaks. But we also started talking about stress, how mood in general can impact successful weight loss. We talked about my week, what I was dealing with, and she listened. And during our call, she said she would send me over some different stress relief techniques and some things to check out. It definitely helped. What happened? Right back into weight loss. You can get the same help too. call 1-844-346-1800. That's 844-346-1800 or online at awaken180weightloss.com. And be sure to tell them that Bel K from Super Talk 99.7 sent you.
President Biden is using a nominating ceremony to brag about what he says is a thrifty economy. We'll tell you about it at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
9:27 in the morning. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's just another Walker.
It's just another
Walker Wednesday. Because that's my fun day. Oh, we botched that up. I told you I don't hear music. By the way,
That's a great hit by the Bungles.
The Bangles. And do you know who wrote that?
Who?
Hello, America. I'm Casey Kasem. Very few people know Manic Monday was written by Prince.
Oh, by Prince.
Prince was a fan of the Bangles and wrote him a song, and it was Manic Monday, and it became one of their big hits, moving up 5 big notches this week. A Republican consultant and analyst, Chris Walker. We were just having some fun talking about, the president's weird, bizarre story. This is a party that wasn't very, first they were all, worshipy of nurses and doctors, and this is the frontline workers. These are the real heroes. And then, of course, when they tried to control them into wearing masks and taking vaccines, they showed them all the door and threw them out. Now the president's trying to praise nurses and launches into a story about Pearl, one who was doing things to him that you couldn't learn at nursing school. It just got so bizarre. But I guess this is their way of trying to mend fences that they tore down. It's really not so funny when you think of the whole COVID dilemma. What about all that? I wonder where health officials are in all of the hysteria of COVID, the non-science narrative, the control and weaponization of COVID, and where they find themselves today. I hope they've connected the dots.
Well, I would argue a little bit that I think the silence from a lot of the medical community on some of the reports we've seen, both from Christopher Wray yesterday and the Department of Energy on Monday, just confirming what anyone with common sense or general understanding of the past 3 years would tell you is that it's very likely that COVID came out of the Wuhan lab. The fact that a lot of the medical community who was pushing a lot of the pseudoscience that we saw in 2020 and 2021, and even now through today, have been relatively silent about that. They will not admit that they were wrong. They will not admit that they took bad advice from bad people and pushed it on everyone as if it were, as they love to say, settled science. And
the dilemma is if they don't acknowledge that, if we don't learn from those mistakes, we're destined to make them again with the next virus. So this is not about, I was one of the only people that were right, or they were all calling us crazy and now they're having to admit it. It's about really still What were you doing in that lab? Why were you doing gain of function? Why was the United States assisting? Why did you do everything to protect the people of China and recklessly allow people to leave the country so it would spread? Why is America to this day still doing gain of function within its own borders? These are the questions that we still haven't gotten to, let alone the narrative and the control game that was played that must never be played again. I mean, when we look at these numbers with our kids and what this did to teens, the shelter in place, what this did to teens, trapping them in dysfunctional situations or in the dysfunction of the social dilemma and how it's led to deep, deep depression and suicide. But God has something different. I think it's about to lead to revival. Our Heavenly Father's about to step in. But these are important lessons to learn, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the problem is when you're wrong, you need to say so to rebuild trust, right? Everyone talks about the, a long-term decay of institutional trust in all of these institutions, including higher ed and, health and all these other things. And it's like, well, yeah, because nobody is saying, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. Or in light of all this, we were wrong. Instead what we hear is we need to move on. We just need to move on. Like, we're not going to ever solve this problem. We need to move on. And, the people who were harmed the most from it, who were told to stay in their homes and not leave, which is completely a wrong account of any scientific nature. We're like, wait a second, like you upended my life, my business, my family, my kids' schooling, everything, and you won't even admit, like, hey, this is wrong. You're just telling me to move on. No, I don't want to move on. I don't want to ever relive that again.
When we come back after the news, and won't be a long break. I love the headline in Fox. Yeah. Credibility crisis. New York Times helped mislead America over COVID. So did the president. So did Fauci. So did the CDC. So did the World Health Organization. So did ABC, NBC, CBS. So did every Hollywood star. So did Fox to some degree. I mean, are you kidding me? Do we want to lay this all based on this story on the New York Times? I think the CDC's credibility, well, I mean, where could we stop there, right? Compare when you and I were teenagers, when we thought of the FBI, we trusted the FBI. Do you trust the FBI today? Do you trust the Justice Department today? Do you trust the CDC today? Come on, there's a credibility crisis, period, in America. It's just another Walker Wednesday. Oh, and that's my fun day. Oh, and more after the news, which is now.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Still tracking the potential for severe weather. Looks like late tonight, everyone south of 40 in the highest risk area. That's a level 2 out of 5. Full forecast in 2 minutes. President Biden spoke today at a White House ceremony nominating Deputy Labor Secretary Julie Su to lead the department, and then bragged about what he says is a thrifty economy.
Our economy sees record job growth. Historic laws that I've signed are going to create even more new jobs in years to come.
Sue would replace Secretary Marty Walsh, who's leaving this month to head the National Hockey League Players Union. Breaking news, and it's welcome to the millions of Americans struggling with diabetes. Eli Lilly says it will cap out-of-pocket insulin costs at $35 for people who have private insurance and use participating pharmacies. And turning to sports, potential top NFL draft pick Jalen Carter has a warrant out for his arrest. Authorities say he played a role in a fatal January car crash. They say Carter was allegedly street racing with a Georgia staffer before the staffer's vehicle crashed into telephone poles, killing the staffer and offensive lineman Devin Willock. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Want to save 50% on new blinds? Blindster.com offers custom-made blinds, shades, and shutters with free shipping and prices less than big box retailers. And right now, save 50% off any order during Blindster's extended President's Day sale. Hurry, sale ends March 1st. Blindster.com.
Hell yes. 9:34. We have sunny skies, 66 degrees at Franklin, 66 in Mount Juliet, 69 off the linoleum in the borough. And downtown on Music Row, our statues are naked, skies are fair. It's 69 degrees. It feels like 69. The Dow's down 23, NASDAQ's down 67, S&P's down 16. All three are in the red, but let's face it, the market is flat at 935. I'm Michael DelGiorno for Zerorez, the right way to clean. Why do I love Zerorez? Because I get insanely clean carpets for an affordable price that stay cleaner longer. Well, how does that happen? Traditional cleaners are going to use chemicals, shampoos, and detergents. And that's fine. They'll clean your carpets. But they're going to leave behind the residue from the chemical shampoos and detergents, and that forms a dirt magnet. So it's going to gather dirt more quickly. Stains reappear quicker. And that makes you call them back and pay them again. And that's just the cycle you've been in. Zerorez comes, insanely clean carpets, no residue left behind because we use empowered water, science, no chemicals, no shampoos, no detergents, zero residue cleaning, thus the name Zerorez. And they stay cleaner longer because there is no dirt gathering agents. Value, quality. And this is the time to go beyond spring cleaning to Zerorez-ification. Our offer, 3 rooms in a hallway, just $129 for the entire month of March. 3 rooms in a hallway, $129. You'll pay more for 1 room elsewhere. Zerorez, the right way to clean. Call today and book your appointment. 535-9376. 535-9376. We also have 20% off air duct cleaning as well. 535-9376 or book your appointment online at ZerorezNashville.com.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Well, the temperature is rising and so are your energy costs. You know, nationwide, those costs are up 14%, but my friends at Window Nation can help you out with a great deal. You know, March is considered their off season, so that means you can beat the season rush with 2 free windows for every 2 that you buy, with no limit. Now, I took advantage of one of their great deals last year with windows for my own basement studio. They look amazing, and yours will too. You also pay 0 down, 0% financing, and 0 payments for 24 months. You can increase the value of your home by $12,000 and save up to 30% on those energy bills. Remember that great deal when you tell him Dan Mandis told you to reach out to Window Nation. No down payment, 0% financing, and no payments for 2 years. Plus, you can get 2 windows for every 2 that you buy with no limit. 866-90-NATION is the phone number, 866-90-NATION. Tell him Dan Mandis told you to reach out online, windownation.com.
9:40 in the morning at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Standing up for what's right. I'm Michael DelGiorno at 20 minutes before 10 o'clock, 69 on our way to a high of 82 on our way to a lot of rain. For a couple of days, I might add. Well, how would the Preds do after shipping off all these stars in favor of draft picks in the future? How would they fare on the ice in real time? Not well. Lost 3-1 to the Penguins. I guess we're going to play for the future. We'll be at Florida tomorrow at 6 o'clock. 12th-ranked Vols beat the Hogs 75-57 last night. One final game. It'll be against Auburn on Saturday, and then it's on to the conference tournament. Vandy will be at Kentucky. That'll be tonight at 6 o'clock. And the Grizz won 129-109 over the Lakers. Remember when the Lakers used to be good? Now they suck. And the Grizz are great. We need to go take a road trip and go see a Grizz game.
I love Grizz games.
Second in the West now, 37-23. That's sports in the talk station. All right, we're visiting another Walker Wednesday. Chris Walker is a consultant analyst for the GOP and the Republican Party. I was just looking at the election results. Clearly, there was a time where Chicago turned to somebody because of her race, because of her sex, and because of her gayness. And then she got involved in a very leftist, progressive campaign against police and for bad guys. And now she's got a real crime problem. The city was turning to somebody that's going to prioritize that and solve that. You suspect this is a nationwide, we've seen it in other cities, but Chicago is the crime capital of the world right now. And this was once a beautiful, safer city, and she's gone. That's a good sign that maybe the progressive left are realizing police are a very good thing. Law and order is a very good thing. And those who serve and protect are a very cherished thing. Looks like that whole, dismantle and defund might be coming to an end, as is Mayor Lightfoot's career.
Well, thank goodness for both. But I would also argue, it's not going to take one election to fix those problems. We're talking about years of damage done to that city. That's going to take years to fix because of reckless and dangerous policies. Lori Lightfoot leaving is a good problem, but you've got a city council that still needs to be, addressed. You've got, a cultural situation in Chicago that needs to be addressed. It's not just, you can't just fire a mayor and think it'll be over. It's like saying Joe Biden would be out of office, would be better off as America. We have a lot of work to do. You
have to admit it's a good start that the voters have prioritized this. They have, she ended up with 16.89% of the vote. That's a get the hell out of here. But you're right.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're right in that, that the gap has widened even further on the streets with animosity in certain groups towards police officers. Now, that continues to be a nationwide narrative. And that's the kind of thing that has really expanded. It took decades to shrink it. The recruitment topic is another very similar conversation. It is very hard to get people to want to be police officers. It's a lose-lose situation. Nobody's on your side. If you do your job, it could ruin your life at any moment. If you don't do your job, crime goes out of control. Obviously, we need people of color to try to bridge these gaps in neighborhoods and communities of color. That looks like a betrayal to your very race if you do it. These are things that won't heal quickly. And actually, we're both wrong. They won't heal in decades, the damage that's been done.
That's right. It's going to take a lot. And it's going to take everybody. It's not just politics, right? Changing a mayor is the easiest, actually, answer to a long-term cultural problem. It's going to take churches. It's going to take community members. It's going to take, businesses. It's going to take everyone coming together and saying, we want better for our city, this being Chicago. But I think you can say the same thing about any city. Nashville, obviously we see in the news what we're happening here with all this stuff going with the city council and the pushback from the legislature right now. That also, we don't want to go down that route. So how do we, as we pick a mayor this year and everything else, start thinking about where do we want to go as a city and who is going to be important? It takes everybody. It's not just replacing a mayor and that solves the problems.
You know as well as I do, I'm just not into this whole civil war between partisan Republican and partisan Democrat politics. I'm not about right versus left. I'm a right versus wrong guy. But I will say this, it will sound like I'm on your side and not on their side. Their worldview has failed. Their policy views have failed. And so what's being created in America are states that are doing well and states that are doing poorly. And in the midst of this whole national narrative game, everybody wants to ignore that. The reality is inner cities are failing, and that's where the blue votes are coming from. Rural areas and red state areas are doing well. I mean, it's not that we hate Democrats. It's that, I mean, did you hear the latest in Oregon? They're going to start giving homeless people $1,000 just to be homeless. I mean, they just don't. Yeah, they just don't get it, and everything that they've done has failed. So let me ask you: will blue inner city people, most, of course, not politically active, will they start awakening to these issues and stop looking at them through the lens of the good guys and the bad guys and just right and wrong, working and not working? Because that's really where it's got to begin. Otherwise, you're just going to have temporary victories.
I couldn't agree more. We have a situation where, but that's not new, right? We've seen it throughout history. I mean, you can link a lot of these these policies that you just said in Oregon to the need for welfare reform in the 90s, to the need of cultural revolution, across Eastern Europe in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there's a consistent balance. I mean, what is it Margaret Thatcher said? At some point, you just run out of other people's money. You can't keep continuing to tax your way or spend your way from a government perspective out of problems. You can only do it through the private economy. The single greatest creator of wealth and advancement in human society is capitalism, and the ability of people to choose their own destiny and work for their livelihood. That's why I'm a conservative and a Republican, because I believe in those principles.
Well, then
we know they work, and that's the only way to get people out of poverty and give them a better future.
Contrast that to this story. The state of Oregon is weighing a bill to give homeless and low-income people $1,000 a month, a universal basic income. I would say, another way they can get $1,000 a month, get off the street and go work. And what do you think they're going to do with that $1,000 that it wouldn't lead them off the street? Do you think $1,000 a month is going to get them off the street? Do you think that's what got them on the street, was a lack of $1,000? Now, this is all happening at the same time where counties surrounding, and of course downtown Portland, crime in Portland has hollowed out the shell. Its neighborhoods are trying to keep it from happening to them because it's starting to spread from that inner city into the outer city areas. And the crime's so bad, the businesses are moving, and as the jobs move, the people are moving. I mean, nobody wants to work where it's unsafe. Nobody wants to live and work where it's unsafe. This is a primary role of government, to provide safety. Well, all their leftist worldviews and policy views have failed. I mean, the question is, will millennials wake up and start voting differently?
That's right. That's right. I mean, I could not have said any better.
But I mean, it's
the only way to go about it.
Do you don't think this is building up like birth pains? This is why, and it's going to upset Donald Trump people. And we're going to end with Donald Trump today. So trust me, there's some good news for Donald Trump in polling. But a DeSantis, you got to get Trump and Biden out of the way, and I doubt either will be out of the way. But if you ended up with a showdown between Gavin Newsom and Governor DeSantis, and everybody had to look at Florida and compare it to California, look at California and compare it to Florida, with all of this happening and like a birth pain beginning in the inner cities where these progressive views are failing so famously, it really would set up a nice conversation for America, maybe a lasting conversation for America. And it's kind of brewing.
Well, I do think we're facing a generational moment. I think we've got this is 92 in a way. I mean, this is it's 30 years ago now. So you're in a position where we are now at a generational shift. 92 is where kind of the boomers kind of took over, and I think we're now in a place where Generation X and the millennials are about to. We've got young, youthful candidates, also running against current incumbents. There's certainly a place for that, but there's so much that we've seen over the past 30 years of America having gone in some really tremendously remarkable places, but also never more divided, never more, split 50-50. We talk about red and blue America. We talk about national divorce, all these other things. These are systemically horrible situations to talk about. We need to be talking about unifying and finding what brings us together. And what we've seen over the last 30 years of our politics and our policies have been more division. That Rasmussen poll that came out that talked about, it's just the racial divide in this country has never been larger right now. Since from a or I would say there's certainly been worse times in history, but, the problems haven't gotten better. Let's just say that. And we have some true problems we have to fix in our inner cities with an out of control federal government that can't stop spending and continue to try to solve problems that don't even, that they're not even mandated to solve. I do see a Florida versus California being the right cure for the ails of not only a red versus blue issue, but a generational issue with which Generation X and millennials are now being in position of raising families and having to be handed the mess that a lot of the previous generations have handed them, saying, how do we actually solve this? And I think we're seeing that in real time play out right now. I do think that's going to be something that happens in 2024.
Chris Walker is a GOP analyst and consultant. He joins us on a Walker Wednesday. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom loves to single out and compare California to Texas, and California being such a better place than Texas. He's actually initiating a game he can't win, and the Sacramento Bee took him to task and literally started saying, well, let's compare California to Texas. But, I mean, here's a governor of a state. People are fleeing by the hundreds of thousands, and they're going to Texas. They're going to Florida. They're going to Tennessee. They're going to North and South Carolina. You'd think that'd be a topic he wouldn't want to bring up, and it's certainly a topic the Sacramento Bee answers. I'm going to do that later in the show. I want to end with these 4 new polls that show President Trump has gotten a little bit of a bump in Republican support. One survey showing him hitting the 50% support in a crowded GOP field. Things that they're kind of crediting is his visit to the derailment area in Ohio, and that he's getting out of his kind of mega rally comfort zone in favor for more intimate, personal, one-on-one or small group gatherings. There is a Trump 2.0 that could win the day if he embraces it. Do you think he is? And do you believe these polls? And do you think this far out they have any meaning?
Unpeeling each question, I think visiting Ohio was a tremendously smart move. It put the Biden administration on defense. It made them look foolish. It made them look uncaring. You win elections by focusing on the domestic issues in this country. George H.W. Bush in 91 had a 90% approval rating and lost because Bill Clinton, focused on the economy, what matters to people back home. The only time we've had a foreign policy election was 2004 after 9/11, which was when the foreign policy came domestically. We have that issue. Joe Biden is talking about Ukraine and other things. It was a great contrast. It was a great week for Donald Trump. I don't think you're going to be able to get him away from wanting to do the crowd thing. That's just what he feeds off of. It's who he is. Obviously he wants to win, but I just think at the end of the day, he loves the adoration and attention of his fans, and that's something that he's going to continue to do. I just don't think that's
and they love him.
And do I believe?
And they love him, and that's what led to January 6th. They love being there with him, but that's when, in the ad lib moments, some bad things can happen. I think what it does show us is if you don't think it's going to be a battle, you're delusional. DeSantis, Trump, I hate to believe in two-man fields this early because I want to vet everybody and give everybody consideration. But in the end, it's going to be a tough battle between these two. And don't be quick to dismiss Donald Trump. He's a long way from over. That's your Walker Wednesday. Chris Walker, consultant, analyst with the Republican Party. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.
Have a great week, brother.
As I always say, we'll talk next week or sooner if conditions warrant. 9:54 at Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
I'm sure by now you've heard how difficult it can be to get certain items these days. Yes, custom order garage doors do take longer, but Aaron's Garage Doors wants you to know they have several garage door options in stock, ready to go with great financing available. If you aren't in need of a new garage door, you can trust Aaron's to service or repair yours right the first time, and with their upfront pricing, there are never any surprises. Call Aaron's Garage Doors today at 615-456-6654 or visit aaronsdoorservice.com.
Want to save 50% on new blinds? Blindster.com offers custom-made blinds, shades, and shutters with free shipping and prices less than big box retailers. And right now, save 50% off any order during Blindster's extended President's Day sale. Hurry, sale ends March 1st. Blindster.com.
If you feel like you've been ripped off by auto repair shops, you're not alone. It's one of the reasons I started Eurofix and AutoFix, because all I ever heard was, they keep your car forever, they're not honest, and they don't call you back when they say they will. Call in this Saturday beginning at 8 a.m. to get advice about your vehicle, and let's see if we can fix it. Find out how to keep from getting ripped off and avoid costly mistakes with your vehicle. Join me this Saturday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's Fixing Cars with Aaron Stokes on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Brought to you by Eurofix and AutoFix.
O'clock on the dot this Wednesday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We are tracking the potential for severe weather. The timeline is going to be tonight and late, around 10:30, 11 o'clock. Everyone south of 40 is under a level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather. Everybody else a level 1 out of 5. Got the full forecast in 2 minutes. Right now in Georgia, potential top NFL draft pick Jalen Carter's wanted on an arrest warrant, alleging he had a role in a fatal crash that killed a University of Georgia staffer and offensive lineman Devin Willock in January. Investigators allege they were all street racing. Carter charged with reckless driving and racing after investigators determined that alcohol impairment and speed and reckless driving were significant contributing factors to that crash. And the nation's more than 8 million people who rely on insulin to survive just got some good news. Eli Lilly plans to cap out-of-pocket costs to $35 a month.
The company says it wants to help consumers afford what's a life-saving drug. But the announcement also could help the company avoid more permanent regulation called for by Democrats. Here's President Biden yesterday.
Folks in Congress, they want to eliminate a lot of health care coverage, those MAGA Republicans. Increase costs for millions of Americans.
By voluntarily capping its insulin price, at least for now, Eli Lilly is helping the Republican argument that a nationwide price fix doesn't have to be enshrined in law.
That's Ann Flaherty reporting. And we're monitoring another train derailment in this country. Victor Akendo says 6 cars of a freight train went off the tracks yesterday near Tampa, one of the cars carrying liquid propane.
Officials saying so far there was no leak, but warning nearby businesses they may have to evacuate if conditions change. More than 150 feet of track uprooted and destroyed. The railway operator Seminole Gulf estimating that repairs will not be completed until next week.
That is the latest news.
Oh, no, it isn't. So, had a doctor. You know, what happened was went on a diet, stopped using sugar. Now, my problem is I don't like the taste of coffee unless I use one of the sweeteners instead of sugar. All right, so now I'm in the sweetener game. And then somebody says, well, you know, the stevia, it has another name too. Is it stevia whole or raw or whatever it is? And switch to that. That one's good for you. That one won't harm you. You know, this brings me, you always like when I bring up Pat.
Oh, yeah.
So Pat Robertson and I are at lunch. And he orders an iced tea unsweetened. And because as he tells the waitress, I'll sweeten it myself. To which there was like 1 part iced tea, 3 parts sugar.
Yes.
And I go, man, Pat, that's a lot of sugar. Maybe you should, use a substitute or something. I don't put anything impure in my body. And of course, Pat's lived to be what? He looks like
still going, man.
Yeah, still going. So he was against it before we had any research on it. And then, of course, now I switched to it. And then they tell me, oh, you're fine with stevia. The stevia is the good one. Not so fast. Or Truvia, whatever's in it. The sugar substitute, erythritol or whatever it's called, found in Truvia natural sweeteners and diet products, may increase risk of blood clots and other heart problems, which, I'm still trying to figure out. Am I having anxiety or heart attacks? I'm probably having sweetener heart attacks. A study of 1,157 participants undergoing a heart risk assessment found that higher levels of this particular artificial sweetener were 2 times at risk of a heart attack, stroke, or blood clots.
Ooh.
Now, Truvia is, I'd have to walk all the way to kitchen and grab it, the one that I'm using. I keep saying stevia. I think it has it as well. Whatever the one is that I switched to is the one that's doing this.
Uh-oh, Brother Michael.
The very group of people most vulnerable to experience adverse cardiac events are the ones that were recommending these kinds of dietary foods. And I can think of the particular doctor that told me to switch from, I was always an equal person. And I think it had something to do with Cher. Cher, 1973, was one of my greatest crushes. And when Cher came on television in the early 90s and said, I choose equal, I said, well, then I choose equal. But, there's Splenda, there's Equal, there's Sweet and Low. There's so many of these. But this is Truvia natural sweeteners, which you'll have to find which brands it's linked to. But the very people that told you these are the safe ones, it's turning out in research, that is the most unsafe one of them. Meanwhile, we said that millennials are missing credit card payments at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, in Portland, they're wanting to give $1,000 a month to the homeless. Well, that solved the problem. These continued wrong ways of, ignoring the true problems. God help us, we talked about what's really going on. And not just finding easy pandering solutions. Continue, and I guess if you assume that these would work, well, that would be the definition of insanity. We'll talk about that and more with David Zanotti from the American Policy Roundtable and host of The Public Square next. First at 10:06, the news was brought to you by...
Confused about your retirement? Is there more you could do to retire with confidence and ensure your family's taken care of? Hi, it's Johnny B, and if you have questions, tune in to Beacon Retirement Strategies with Pete Benson and John Maxon. Saturdays at 7 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. Learn how to invest your money, prepare for retirement, and solidify your future. Get straightforward and objective advice that can help you make the most out of every dollar you've saved for retirement. Beacon Retirement Strategies with Pete Benson and John Maxon. Saturdays at 7 a.m., Sundays at 9 a.m. on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
The fact is, you can buy quality flooring just about anywhere. However, if you absolutely have to know you're getting the best price, there's only one place, and that's Buy Floors Direct. You see, every bit of flooring at the big retail decor stores or home centers comes from the manufacturer, then shipped to their warehouse, but then it's reshipped to their retail stores, where additional costs like an expensive location, middleman, fancy displays are all added to your final price. At Buy Floors Direct, it comes from the factory to our warehouse to you, so there are no retail markups. It's why we're the largest seller of flooring in all of Middle Tennessee. It's not complicated. When you absolutely want the best price on flooring, do what contractors do. Go to a Buy Floors Direct warehouse or buyfloorsdirect.com.
Five 227-2275. That's 227-2275.
All right, at 10:12, we have sunny skies, 69 degrees at the Puffy Muffin in Brentwood, 67 to the north in Hendersonville. Downtown on Music Road, the statues are naked, a light summer breeze on March 1st. Sunny skies, 70 degrees, feels like 70. The market now down triple figures. The Dow's down 122, NASDAQ's down 101. The S&P is down 27 as Joe Biden's nurse would lean over and whisper in his ear, "Shang Shu Joe, the market is down at 1012." Well, I was wrong yesterday about the Dexter Lake Club, and today I got everybody confused. So I did some research during the news break, along with Lisa Manning from Nash FM. Virtually any of these artificial sweeteners with the ingredient that ends with TOL are bad. But I have to apologize to stevia in the raw. That one is not it. Truvia is it, and so are some others. So just to make it clear, if you've been using Truvia, that's the one linked to heart attacks and blood clots. Stevia is not. So, can't blame my chest pains on that. David Zanotti always joins us from the American Policy Roundtable. We don't have a fun song for him either. And then it's usually a David Zanotti Friday. Oh, but today it's Wednesday. Oh. CEO of the American Policy Roundtable and host of the Public Square, heard on 200 stations nationwide, including this one on Sunday mornings, and anytime on demand at thepublicsquare.com. And right now with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
You're in the war zone, the battle of DeSantis versus Disney. I also have a latest poll that looks good for Donald Trump. Newsom's wanting to pick fights with Texas, which has even the Sacramento Bee saying, well, what is California versus Texas? How are they doing? I don't think that's a conversation Governor Newsom would want to have. And then the Atlantic story, a bombshell, a civil war that has begun between the left and the right. We got a lot to cover today. What about the Disney DeSantis wars and jurisdiction?
Corporate ego is a bad thing, because what Disney lost here in regards to losing their specific land governance status as the Reedy Creek District.
Explain what that means to everybody, because I think people are hearing this story and they don't realize they have their own government. They have their own police department. Yeah, it's a sovereign area.
And look, I know people have a lot of problems with Disney. Me too. I get it. All right. I'm not a sycophant, but I will tell you that I'm a fan of the story of Walt Disney.
As am I, and the early creativity of Walt Disney.
Yeah, and I still like the early Mickey Mouse, okay? The story
Thank you very much.
It's compelling.
Love you too, Dave. But I'll tell you what this DeSantis is doing is really hacking me off. Coming into my town, taking my badge off.
So look, when Walt started the operation, he bought this massive land mass, a huge portion of it, which is still not yet fully developed by far. There's still cattle grazing on Disneyland, okay? And what they created was a special governmental district called the Reedy Creek District, in which they would control the water, they would control police, fire, highways, etc. That's why when you get near Disney, it's their roads, it's their security, it's their fire, it's their emergency responders, etc. So they've got their own world. Okay,
literally.
They're transparent about it. They've got their own
world. Not the
amusement
park world.
Right. And this was done in deference to the value that Disney would bring to Florida. This happened back in the 60s, and it's worked out very well until the time that Disney began to really believe that not only was it their world, but they were going to basically start to dictate to everybody else what the world should look like. And when they started to play the role of telling the world what the legislature should look like and playing the games that they played during COVID, in regards to their responses and the way that they handled things, people began to look twice and say, we're not so sure. And then when they stepped out and said, we're going to tell Florida how their children shall be instructed in public education, the Republican legislature said, that's about as far as you're going to go. And now that we think about it, maybe what we need to do is to review the fact of why you think you're so big anyhow. And they looked at Reedy Creek and said, here's something we can do. We can revoke this very special privileged status that you had, and now your land is going to be treated like everybody else's
land. Your land is our land. It's always been our land.
As well. And that means you've lost control of a little piece of your world. Wake up.
All right, so you have Mike Pence commenting on this.
What's really sad is that the corporate people at Disney would come into the position where they would go ahead and say, well, we could negotiate our way out of that, but they chose not to.
All right, so you got Mike Pence saying, are you hearing me, by the way?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
Now I am.
Now you are. You weren't for a minute, were you? I could
thought
tell.
we probably talked over. It was my fault, not his fault, folks. He didn't interrupt me. I lost my headphones for a second.
Oh, and I was singing to you, too. You missed my beautiful vocals.
Oh, could you do it again?
No, I refuse. Okay. You've insulted me, and it's over, and the moment has passed.
I've embarrassed you. No, how does that work? You've embarrassed yourself and
the Joe Vig,
me.
You want me to do?
Yes.
You've insulted me, and you've embarrassed yourself. No.
I have.
All that laughingly, jokingly aside. All right, so I want people to really understand this. So Florida's a different place today than it was when this deal was crafted, and they went too far first. That much, I think I think even Mike Pence's judgment would be that. The minute you start taking back from them, Mike Pence says you're going too far. I don't. I know everybody thinks I'm just Mr. Pro DeSantis. Again, I do this just for the sake. I'm open to everyone. It's a year and 9 months from a primary election. Every one of these candidates deserve my attention. They deserve my vetting, and they deserve my long, hard look at them. And so Nikki Haley will get that opportunity with me. Governor DeSantis will. Donald Trump will. So don't start taking dysfunctions into our conversation. I don't think in this particular case, I think Disney went too far. I don't think Governor DeSantis is going too far. And I don't think it's enough to do a shot across the bow. If they're not going to respond, I think you've got to follow through. What are people, first of all, how would this look? I mean, Disney can't just pack up and leave. You can't pick up all those physical buildings. And I mean, you can leave. I get that. And good. Let Dolly move right in with their rides and retheme it. But now the debate has actually turned to primary candidates. That's what politics will do, right? So let me get your response. Mike Pence says he's going too far. What are the people in Orlando and Florida feeling like?
Well, first off, the governor can't do this without the legislature saying this is what we agree to do. So this is a we thing. It's not a dictate. It's not an executive order. This is something the General Assembly has decided to do, and it's not the only district they've revoked. There were several others. They've said, you know what, we're done with this. We're going to go a different way. So those are the people's representatives there, and the people here in Florida have the right of redress, and they're going along with this pretty well. Now, they may change their mind a year from now or two and say that wasn't such a good idea, but this has gone past the notion of this is not revenge. This is rebalancing. That's what's really going on here. So we need to be careful about that. Secondly, okay, Pence has got his opinion. That's fine. All right, not a big deal. But let's be the one thing that people don't know is Disney already has left. They left California. They're moving 2,000 of their best jobs out of California into Florida by design and by purpose. Their executive jobs, they're moving their entire administration of their corporation from California to Florida. They already left one state. They're not about to leave Florida.
I want to share a story with you. This will give you a third dimension to this conversation. Parents decided to surprise their kids. And if you're going to surprise your kids and take them anywhere, every kid wants to go to Disney World, right? Long Island mom, Jocelyn Martin, couldn't wait to watch her daughters, Delaney and 9, Drew 5, of course, probably for Jocelyn's childhood memories. And I will tell people, common education today, K through 12, looks nothing like when you were going through K through 12. The textbooks aren't the same. The lessons aren't the same. The world has changed dramatically. And Disney isn't the same Disney it was the last time you were there. But it's every parent's kind of instinctive dream to bring their kids to Disney World and see them experience it for a first time. Martin had planned the vacation for months. I thought that they would, see their suitcases and just absolutely lose their minds. And they did. According to Yahoo News, in footage shared on TikTok, the unexpected Delaney and Drew are seen coming home from school when Martin announces that they're going to Disney World. Delaney looks absolutely horrified and begins to cry. Then Drew begins to sob. And no, these were not happy tears. They're both terrified of heights, and that's what set them off. I think it was like, I want to go to Disney, but I don't want to go on airplanes. In the midst of all of this is the social dilemma and all of the emotional insecurities of young people that have nothing to do with this argument. And now you're going to start adding parents with differences with Disney. And then a third dimension, a state's differences with Disney that's gone too far, meddling into these parents' kids' lives. I mean, it really is. And then you talk about that one dimension at the end that made me think of all this. They're moving all their executives from California to Florida. This is really a perfect storm in bad time for Disney, isn't it? And not a lot is pointing their way. I hope you followed where I was going with that. So It's all of the above. And I know they just changed leadership, and that doesn't seem to have impressed anybody in this fight. But when we come back, this kind of perfect storm, what's the next move for Disney? Is there a right move for Disney to get out of this? From somebody in Orlando right now, David Zanotti with the American Policy Roundtable next.
Arrest warrants issued for the potential top NFL draft pick and Georgia football star Jalen Carter. And some hearings underway in our nation's capital. You got to hear about how easy it is to get fentanyl and what the Attorney General said about it. Details at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And a local talk host who has fallen into deep depression. Opie, Ron Howard, is 69 years old.
Goodness. That's still young, actually.
I know, but doesn't that how is...
Thank you, Ken.
Richie Cunningham will be 70 in a year.
Opie.
Catherine Bach, Daisy Duke. I have a confession to make for my dear friend. I never watched Dukes of Hazzard. I've never seen a single episode. Now, as God would have it, I become very close friends with John Snyder, who's going through a very difficult time after losing his wife. Please keep him in your prayers. And I've been in contact with him. He's in the early stages of grief, and he really needs your prayers. But I never watched his show. Daisy Duke, Catherine Bach, is 69 years old today as well. And Harry Belafonte, one of the early, most politically leftist activist stars, who had a great career. I mean, you got to remember, Harry Belafonte was a huge star when he started going crazy leftist. 96 years old today.
Wow.
And happy birthday if it's your birthday. All right, so David, I'm painting this big picture, and now I want to do the other side of it, and that's the Disney side of it. You know as well as I do, when I go to Disney World, people from all over the world have no problem flying there and attending there. And so part of you goes, well, this is a very local battle going on with a world attraction. That gives you a perspective. Maybe it's even got some, and maybe it's even got some national, bad standing with some of this wokeness. That's a very, very small sector of conservative parents in a country they don't really rely on for their attraction. Are we blowing this out of proportion? Is this a really, really big, bad timing, bad storm for Disney? Or is it, like my gut feeling, looks a lot worse from our vantage point than it really is to their bottom line?
No, it's very serious, and it's very serious to their bottom line. But I think a couple of things that are not being reported is the fact that the reason we know about the wokeness is because internal Disney employees leaked information out. In essence, not official whistleblowers, but information came out about the internal dialogues. Those videos that came out shook the world. The reason that there's a new CEO at Disney, a chairman of Disney new CEO, who is the old CEO, is because employees inside Disney weighed in and said, we're not going the right direction. The people at Disney know they were going in the wrong direction, and they basically had, Mickey's got his suspenders clipped big time here.
Yeah.
And they know that. They know they have a problem. They have to fix it. Now, they're not going to be able to turn that ship around in an instant. Now, you say to yourself, who cares? And you know what? That's a very fair question. Good night. We can make it in America without Disney. Don't need them. Don't have to have them. We can make them without the Disney conglomerate and ABC. Not a fan. Don't need them. Don't have to have them. It's their problem. What's exciting to me is people coming to the realization is they don't have to go there.
Right.
They don't have to participate, and they don't have to be a part of Disney Plus and all that sort of stuff. They don't have to.
Can I tell
What's
you?
important?
I was just going to say, can I tell you in the DelGiorno home? They lost to Universal. My kids don't want to go to Disney World. My kids want to go back to Orlando after they graduate and go to Universal one last time as a family, or they're ready to go back to Gatlinburg and go to Dollywood in Pigeon Forge.
I would say go with Dollywood if you'll forgive my personal opinion.
I'm just saying it's not. But I mean,
only because
compare that to my childhood, though. Disney was everything. It was the place to go.
People don't realize is that Universal is owned by Comcast.
No, I get that, and I'm not.
You know that, but all the people in Middle Tennessee who live in Comcast hell, like we do when we're in our office there, have to understand that it's the Roberts family of Comcast that's controlling Universal and all of their communications, including NBC, NBC's News, and MSNBC. So this is the real fight, but we've been talking about that for years. The real fight is the big media giants.
No, I get that.
Let
me do a John F. Kennedy here, and we're all at the table. So how's all this play out?
How does all this play out? Slow track. Disney will be in better shape 5 years from now than they are right now.
State going to take away this authority from them?
Oh, it's done.
Done?
It's done. It's signed. DeSantis has signed it. It's done.
So what are we talking about in terms of just lifting the tax exempt status? What are the numbers to the bottom line?
Let's just say there's a whole lot of people in Disney administrative management that are asking the very same question, cracking the books and going, whose idea was this?
So in the end, do they have to raise prices to cover this?
Well, again, we got to go to break, but at the end, people need to recognize Disney capitalized on COVID in a brilliant way. They have completely restructured the way that they do business, and I think that their model will survive without any question, but there's no doubt that they got clipped here.
Did DeSantis beat the mouse?
Yeah.
When we come back, don't count Donald Trump out, not according to the latest polls. There's still a chance, a best chance for Trump in a Trump 2.0, if Trump will see it. That's after the news, which starts now.
Ken Weaver with your top stories, tracking the potential for severe weather. It comes late tonight. Everyone south of 40 with that level 2 out of 5 risk. Everybody else north of 40, level 1 out of 5. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Arrest warrants have been issued for potential top NFL draft pick Georgia football star Jalen Carter for reckless driving and street racing the night a university staffer and a teammate were killed after crashing into telephone poles. Right now in our nation's capital, retired DEA Special Agent Derek Maltz telling the House Judiciary Subcommittee how easy it is to get pills laced with fentanyl.
Addicted people need help. Mental illness is on the rise, and kids are sadly turning to these pills for help. They're using social media platforms to get what they need. It's as simple as ordering food. The cartels are invaded our homes.
And Attorney General Merrick Garland testifying today that Mexican cartels are, as he put it, unleashing the fentanyl epidemic on the U.S. on purpose. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Currently in Franklin, sunny skies, 71 degrees, 71 in Mount Juliet, 73 in the boroughs, 72 downtown. The market improving. The Dow's down just 26 now. NASDAQ's still down 80, and the S&P's down 18. All three are in the red, but coming back towards green. I'm Michael DelGiorno. We're visiting with the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable and host of the Public Square, David Zanotti. And latest, about 4 polls, really, show a bump for the president, former President Donald Trump. He received a boost in Republican support in one survey, showing him hitting close to 50%. And now it's a getting more crowded field. I wouldn't even call it a crowded field yet. Donald Trump is in. Nikki Haley's in. Who's our guy that we liked?
Is it Mel or
no? The one
from Maryland?
No, no, that's Democrat. No, the one
Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy,
yes,
is in. Actually, to be honest with you, DeSantis is not officially in yet, though. A lot of the numbers, David, as you know, point to the battle between Donald Trump. I'm very careful not to limit it to a Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. All these candidates deserve your consideration and your vetting. But it does look like going to Ohio was a good move for Trump. He's getting out of his mega rally comfort zone in favor of several small campaign stops. Did an ice cream in South Carolina, McDonald's in Ohio. And so what we're seeing is Trump with a 30-point lead, 55-25 over DeSantis, up from 26% in the Emerson poll. Now, again, that's just the Emerson poll, and it's polling in general. But yeah, I want to kind of cut to the chase because it's a year and 9 months out. We don't have to overreact to a poll like this. There is a battle coming between Trump and DeSantis. And Donald Trump is a very formidable opponent, especially if he finds a Trump 2.0 for a different moment and a different time. Could he be finding it?
Well,
time will tell, of course.
Yeah, that's a fascinating concept. Let's look at it this way. Let's take a look at his history. One-term presidents attempting comebacks, it's sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It depends in the moment and under the circumstances. So I would say that Donald Trump has no better or worse chance as anybody else who's ever tried it before. Teddy Roosevelt tried it, didn't work. Others have tried it. So we just see what happens in that regard. Number one, he's got to stay healthy enough to run a year and 9 months from now. You say, well, come on, he's bulletproof. Well, nobody's bulletproof. I use a better term, health-wise. That's what I'm talking about. No one has a guarantee on what's going to happen health-wise to them tomorrow. We don't know. So if he stays healthy and has the energy level that he has, okay, now that's a fair context. We also have to presume the context of who's he running against. A very different situation. He ran for an open seat. Now he's running against an incumbent. Is Biden the nominee? I think that's almost a foregone conclusion. I think that's pretty much a done deal. Joe Biden will be the nominee because they've got nobody else.
Well, it's beyond that. They don't have anybody else, but if I, from the right, have come to the conclusion he's their best chance, they've come to that conclusion.
Yes, they certainly have. And some of the articles you and I have been talking about privately that from internal documents or released messaging from internal high-level Democrat consulting firms connected to the powers that be have reached that conclusion. So you don't see any moves being made. But Biden, God forbid, Biden might drop over tomorrow. He's 80 years old.
Well, I know the nurse that'll revive him. But anyway, the issue with Joe Biden is everybody was talking about how nobody in his party wants him to run. Nobody in America wants him to run. Right about the time of the State of the Union and when he would have announced he was running, I think he just let all that chill. And I think he's letting time pass and news cycles move on to more favorable ground before he announces. But in my mind, there's no question he's going to announce. In my mind, believe it or not, the old man they hid in a basement that came in 4th in Iowa and 7th in New Hampshire is their best bet. I think their worst disaster is if he gets out of the way. Then their only play is the new Maryland governor. But Ron, as you can see, Gavin Newsom's positioning himself in case he doesn't run. And I think that's their worst nightmare. Gavin Newsom trying to hold up California as an example for America's future against a guy who can represent his presidency that made America great or a governor of a great state like Florida. That's a disaster for them. So I think they've even come to the conclusion that Joe Biden is their best bet. So assuming it's Biden, I don't see anybody rising up to take out Trump or DeSantis if they're both in. So I think we're looking at a long battle between Trump and DeSantis. The times have changed, though. America's not looking for an outsider. Everybody's addressing the border. Everybody's addressing crime in the streets. So it becomes a question of, do we want a proven governor and an old track? That used to be what it is. An executive from a big state becomes the executive of the United States. Or do we want to go back to 4 years ago? And I think the thing, and this is just me, and I can be wrong, if I want Donald Trump to get elected this time, like I wanted him to get elected last time, he can't be the same candidate. He can't. It won't work this time. And so I'm looking for a Trump 2.0.
Certainly is convinced, yeah. And the inside score on the left logic is this. You'll see it if you get to their documents and you get to the articles where the progressives want other progressives to read what they're really thinking. They consider Trump a three-time loser. They consider Trump lost in the midterm elections of 2018, and they of course, they don't talk Trump anymore. They don't use his word. They do not use his name. All they talk about is MAGA. They've created what they wanted. They've created the MAGA monster, and it emanates from the dragon of Trump. And so now their shorthand is simply MAGA, and MAGA now is anything they disagree with.
Well, yeah, but they're trying to isolate 25 to 31% of the Republican Party, along with Trump himself, to create some chaos in the party uniting before a general coming out of a primary too, which is pretty smart.
But they believe that they can beat Trump. They believe they beat him in 18. They believe they beat him in 20. They believe they beat him in 22. So they want Trump. Now, are they actually falling prey to the great mistake that political parties make, which is fighting this year's battle based on last year's war? And you know, they may feel so comfortable that they can beat Trump that they may be in for a surprise, because who knows how the American people are going to feel. And here's the other thing. How do we know what the American voters are going to do? How do we know that this election will not be a 100% referendum on something that Americans have never faced before, which is, do they want an 84-year-old president?
And that's going to be a problem for both candidates.
And now, so they're going to be looking at, if their selection is who looks like they're going to survive the next 4 years, that's a completely different election. Now it's based on hair and makeup, right? And both these guys are hurting there.
It sure makes their choice for vice president very consequential. Before I get to that conversation, I want to kind of take you back one step. Donald Trump won as an outside. You're going to interrupt me, and you're right to do it, and everybody's going to get mad when we say it. I can tell you Donald Trump supporters are going to hate hearing it. They're not going to consider it. They think Donald Trump is a savior of such, and any inclination that he actually lost anything and it wasn't stolen is a conversation breaker. You would probably say Donald Trump got elected president because nobody wanted Hillary Clinton. But I would also say it was an outsider election, and he played the outside game great. So did Bernie Sanders. And if the natural trajectory had taken place, it would have been Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. But the Democrats didn't allow that, and they forced Hillary. And she still managed to get the popular vote, but not the Electoral College. I don't think he can run as an outsider this time. I think he needs to run as a former president.
Of course.
Yeah, and so that means
completely.
insults and giving people funny nicknames, that's all out. The vulnerability of those long MAGA gatherings where sooner or later he'll ad-lib something that they can overinflate or over-magnify as dangerous, become proclivities. I think he needs to run. The country is going to be in shambles economically. It's already beginning. So it's 2023, and inflation has taken them to living paycheck to paycheck, and now we're getting to the job loss portion of this journey. Their credit cards are maxed out. Their car payments are sinking them. Home ownership is unaffordable. I mean, there's some really bad economic times ahead, and they're going to hit right about election time. Crime is kind of rising as a crisis right now, but it'll still be around because these problems can't be solved immediately. And the border and fentanyl and the effect of overreach of COVID and the psyche of young people. There's a lot of perfect storms coming for them. I think it's a perfect time for Donald Trump to run as a former president who's going to show everybody what he did, what they broke, and how he can fix it again. Get out of the name-calling business. Get out of the, Twitter business and get into the presidential candidacy. I think there's room for what I would call a Donald Trump 2.0, and I think he can win. I don't know that he can stick to that, though.
Well, now you're in the realm of where people have lost their minds as political consultants and advocacy organizations, et cetera. Let me completely deconstruct what you just said by throwing something totally different. Let's have a Monty Python moment here. Now for something completely different. What if the Republican play was to gain seats in the House, win back the Senate,
and lose the
presidency, because 4 more years of Biden is the Democrats' worst nightmare, with the House and Senate controlled by the Republicans? Why not go for that game and then take DeSantis 4 years from now?
That's presuming that each Republican primary, night after night after night, is willing to choose Donald Trump over DeSantis. If you get DeSantis, now you got yourself a presidential race that would thwart that.
And I think would be imminently winnable. But at the same time, Ron DeSantis has got no reason to enter the race. He's got 2 more years to be governor. He's doing a great job. He's going to be in a good situation. He might choose to run for the Senate. In the meantime, he's got a shot coming at the White House if he continues in public service at the level of
now you
integrity
just change
that
the
he's doing
subject
right now.
Now you just change the subject to something more interesting. No, I think now is the moment for DeSantis. If he wants to
I would disagree.
See, I think if he wants to be president, now is the perfect moment. And by the way, if you saw that interview he did the other day with how am I forgetting our evening host?
With Brett Baer?
No, the great one.
With Levin.
Mark Levin.
Yeah.
I mean, flawless.
Good interview.
Flawless definition of what a conservative is. Flawless definition of the threat of wokeism. Doesn't attack anybody else.
There's no question DeSantis is the real deal.
Yeah, I think I think now is the time. But we'll see how this plays out.
There's also no question that Donald Trump's qualified to be president of the United States again. He could be a lot better president the second time around. No one's arguing that. Question is who gets elected and how. And there is another team here.
Oh, yeah, and they'll have a say. All right, when we come back, I want to do one other thing with you, and that is this notion of a civil war, a political Cold War, civil war that has already begun. Takes us to a story out of the Atlantic that we want to dust out. I think, and then really, quite frankly, the more interesting topic and how that plays if there is a cultural movement towards God underway. If we're seeing revival happening, actually, the more interesting conversation is, are we witnessing the early seeds of a revival or a cultural awakening? Because now that it's spread to Texas A&M, I think you have to be leery of awakening over revival. Now we're outside of just Christian universities where the Spirit seems to be moving among our young. And how that might, as I've often said, David, you will not find a spiritual solution politically. But you can find political change through spiritual solutions. And so I think if America's culture and young people are going through an awakening that turns to God and there's a revival sparked in the church, it's going to have a great impact on an election 2 years from now, wouldn't it?
You got to go to break. I'm not going to take that one. I'll wait.
All right. I'll take the tease. 10:51 at WTN.
traffic issue. This is going to be on the East Loop downtown. Looks like the off-ramp is blocked from 24 westbound to Spring Street, Ellington Parkway. Looks like there's some sort of police activity in that location. A potential top NFL draft pick has been named and arrest warrants. We'll tell you about that coming up at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And somehow my visit with David Zanotti still got to get to COVID. It's still got to get to the cold civil political partisan war we're in. And then I have to be the idiot that throws out the topic. Are we in the midst of seeing revival or cultural awakening? What was I thinking when I went to that? How much time do we have? Because these are all hour-long conversations.
Well, I guess we better keep going for a little bit.
I guess we're going out of order. I mean, this is a whole big topic that maybe we should do later. Just a kind of like a quick question and answer. Are you seeing sign? Again, I thought John Irwin said it so beautifully yesterday. There's a big difference between revival that happens within the church and awakening that happens within culture. And we might be seeing both simultaneously, but I think because it started at a Christian university, but I'm sensing more of a cultural awakening. And that's when I noticed, my kids' generation, more than the kids before them, and then Mac's generation and the generation before that, they instilled in them from the very beginning was not just accepting answers. Now, some of that was coming from the left, provoking them, but by and large, they had a searching in their heart that was different from previous generations. And you couldn't give them pat answers. And they kept searching and looking for meaning. Most of them found no meaning and therefore had eating disorders and suicide and social dilemma tendencies. But now I'm seeing these same kids just spontaneously starting to do Bible studies in my house. I mean, I'm sensing both awakening and revival. But we only have 2 minutes, but I kind of posed the question for those that are listening right now in this space and time. Are you sensing revival, awakening, or both?
Well, the evidence is overwhelming that things are happening across college campuses in the country, and that they are independent and not orchestrated. There's not somebody ringing a cash register here or someone operating master plan. So some people would say, well, that means that the Holy Spirit is breaking out. Okay, I don't know exactly all the theological realities of how that language works. This much I do know. People are coming forward in chapel services or study groups or worship services out in parks, kneeling down and saying, God, I'm in trouble, help me. And when people begin to do that, the scripture is clear. Ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. And those are the words of Jesus. And when people go looking for him, he is quite findable. And it would make all the sense in the world that this generation would lift up their eyes to God and cry out, because the hopelessness that has been offered them by the pagan culture that they have been surrounded by gives them no hope. And people can't live without hope.
Yeah, because, but can I give you an example of that too? Sure. So it doesn't go over people's head? Even the whole gender movement, never mind, I'm not going to re-litigate that. What it presents to kids like mine is some kind of a confusion. They don't understand. Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Why? Because ultimately, when we forget, it's been so long since we've been that age, we're looking for our identity. We're looking for our purpose, and they're offering confusion. And then, they try to be accommodating to it, but they even see it more as confusion and nonsense and not satisfying for those that are going through it or for them that are observing it. It just builds their thirst for truth. It builds lies, make them thirsty for truth. These misleading attacks make them even more searching. And there's, as you know as well as I do, never mind ask, never mind knock. I mean, this is a generation right now crying out to God in desperation, crying out to God in confusion, crying out to God in deception and distortion and dishonesty. Well, let me tell you something. Your Heavenly Father, I know I have knocked, I have sought, I have prayed. When I cry out, he instantly his head turns. And I think that's happening. But to dust out revival versus awakening, we'll do a little bit more. Got to get to COVID and all of the COVID lies and control that are coming to the surface. And maybe it's the Atlantic story that can wait. Are we in a partisan cold civil war? But we'll see where the hour leads us. More with David Zanotti after the news now.
11 o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got that traffic issue on the East Loop downtown. The off-ramp is blocked. That's to go from 24 westbound to Spring Street, Ellington Parkway. Police activity there. Full forecast coming up in 2 minutes. Tell you about the risk for severe weather late tonight. It is a level 2 out of 5 south of I-40. A potential top NFL draft pick is named in arrest warrants related to a fatal crash in January. Authorities say Georgia star Jalen Carter was street racing the night a former staffer and teammate died after crashing into telephone poles. Carter is currently at the NFL scouting combine in Indy, now accused of reckless driving and racing leading up to that crash. Carter changed his story about that night from being about a mile behind the car that crashed to actually being alongside the other car, and reports say he actually showed up at the scene 90 minutes later. Right now in our nation's capital, congressional hearings underway. Retired DEA Special Agent Derek Maltz telling the House Judiciary Subcommittee how easy it is to get pills laced with fentanyl.
In my view, fentanyl is a chemical weapon, and the narco-terrorists in Mexico are destroying our country. They need to be held accountable, even if it means using our U.S. military.
Over on the Senate side, Attorney General Merrick Garland testified today that Mexican cartels are, as he put it, unleashing the fentanyl epidemic on the U.S. on purpose. And a major pharmaceutical company out with some welcoming news for Americans struggling with diabetes. Eli Lilly says it will cap out-of-pocket insulin costs at $35 for people who have private insurance and use participating pharmacies. President Biden bragging about his pick to lead the Department of Labor. Deputy Labor Secretary Julie Su.
She's increased the minimum wage, cracked down on wage theft, protected trafficked workers, established and enforced workplace safety standards.
Sue would replace Secretary Marty Walsh, who is leaving this month to head the National Hockey League Players Union. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
All right, currently at 11:06, we have sunshine, 74 degrees. It feels like 74 in Nashville. The market's actually really improved. The Dow's now in the green. We were once down almost 200. Now it's up 47. NASDAQ was down over 100. Now it's only down 40. And the S&P's almost back to even. It's down $8. So 2 out of 3 are in the red, and the market is improving. Can't wait to see what noon holds. Blue Umbrella Medical Center. If you're frustrated with sick care, and that's what it really is. If you were healthy, you wouldn't need a doctor. It's sick care, and it's failing you. You're getting no answers, no relief. Let me encourage you to check out Blue Umbrella Medical Center of Middle Tennessee, because Dr. Jay Hitson and her team of very talented physicians, including MDs, are different. They offer state-of-the-art lab testing. That's going to get you what you've been looking for, real answers. Then once we have the real answers, then we dig for what we call the root cause, and you're going to see very sophisticated advanced diagnostic equipment help us arrive at that root cause. Then we treat the root cause. We don't chase symptoms. We treat the root cause, and you get actual relief. Now, neuropathy is the great example. Acute, chronic, crippling. MDs tell you there's nothing that they can do. It's even going to get worse. We're going to get to that root cause. We're going to treat it with cutting-edge regenerative treatments that will stimulate, reactivate, and regenerate the damaged tissue and nerve endings. That's real, lasting relief, and it's covered by insurance, and it begins with a free consultation. Actual health care with real results. It's wonderful. Set up your free consultation today with Blue Umbrella Medical of Middle Tennessee. Call 610-6937, 610-6937, or online at blueumbrellamedical.com. Well, I know some of you, 13 to 15 or whatever it is, enjoy watching WTN on television. It's kind of a peek behind the scenes, and I get that. I'll give you a verbal peek behind the scenes, and that is while radio wants us to talk about what is brewing, which is a great primary battle between a former President, Donald Trump, and a current governor, Ron DeSantis, and there are other candidates, and so politics becomes top of mind. COVID lies and narratives and betrayals are coming to light. That's the things that talk radio would have you talk about. Not even talk radio wants to talk about Joe Biden's story about his nurse. But the Holy Spirit obviously wants to talk about something different. And I think it's fair game, because I stand by my statement that could be a quote of a lifetime, and that is, you will not find spiritual solutions through politics, but you will find political solutions through spiritual solutions and awakenings. And there is something going on in America. And just as Time Magazine covered the Jesus movement as portrayed in the movie Jesus Revolution, it's starting to pay attention. You can go to Fox News, CNN, and there's reports about what's going on at Asbury. How did it spread to Texas A&M? So I do think it's fair game, and I do think it's going to have a say in future political outcomes as much as the other things that we were kicking around. So if you're just joining us, David Zanotti is joining us from the American Policy Roundtable in the Public Square, and we start having this conversation about something that John Irwin said on the show yesterday. He's the writer and director of the Jesus Revolution, and that is, he learned the difference between revival and awakening. And revival is something that happens within the church, which, let me just interrupt and say, I have a very strange discipleship upbringing. And it doesn't make sense when I say it today, but because I was the product of the Jesus movement, I was exposed to people like Leonard Ravenhill. I was exposed to people like Watchman Nee. I was exposed to David Wilkerson and some very advanced teachings. And so very early on, I was very fascinated with revival. And so I read Leonard Ravenhill's Why Revival Tarries. Now, there's a lot of holiness discussion in Why Revival Tarries, but you'll miss the big point. The big point that Leonard Ravenhill is exploring is, you wonder why revival isn't coming? Well, yes, it's as simple as you're unholy, but it's more than that. The more your church looks different than the early church in the book of Acts, the less likely revival is. And so he's doing a comparative study of what we saw with the early disciples in church. By the way, that ended in death for them, but that kind of scattered and reaching out and meeting needs first versus centralized church, which is most common, what religion often produces and what most of you have experienced over your lifetime. Let me use a different analogy. The biggest churches today are based on the pastors. The biggest churches during the Jesus movement, during revival times, is the move of the Holy Spirit. And it's the way the believers are living all week outside of church, and all the hurting people they come across and find and bring to the church. Those were the big churches. Then once the big church starts trying to be administrative and manage all these crowds, then you get right back to being centralized again. So it's kind of a cycle. So, David, to begin the discussion, I would say the Holy Spirit moves like a wind, and it spreads and takes with it, and then it passes. And then man becomes center again. I think that's what you're going to see in the movie Jesus Revolution when you watch it. But I do think that was a powerful statement that John made. Revival is something that happens within the church. Awakening is something that happens within culture. And then I always use the Bruce Wilkerson 3 chairs analogy. I think that's when God steps in and he moves the chairs. Otherwise, you get stuck in rebellion, and I think that's what's pushing back to chair one, which is really believing and really living it. But
well, when we look, Michael, at history of the Jesus movement, it actually began in the late 60s in California. Now, it reached the Midwest a few years later in the early 70s. Now, it reached you in what year?
77. Because it reached my coach in 75, it reached me in 77.
And so this concept of a revived sense of faith and crying out to God is something that spanned well over 10 years.
Exactly.
It spanned well over 10 years. That's a very significant point. In addition to that, we call it revival. It's an interesting American nomenclature because we've had multiple great awakenings in American culture. But what we know about great awakenings is this: they begin with people crying out to God. You could call the Reformation in the 1500s a great awakening. It began with a handful of individuals. Martin Luther wasn't the only one who began to cry out to God for true meaning, for true answers to true questions. And they found those true answers and meaning that they were looking for. It began there in the case of a Catholic priest. So there are all kinds of ways.
By the way, can I just real quick?
Sure.
Don't lose your thought, because I know we live in a culture here that sometimes frowns upon Catholicism. And don't forget that Jesus movement manifested as the charismatic movement in the Catholic Church. And that same Jesus movement, by way of the charismatic movement in the Catholic Church, reached my grandmother in 1974, which also came back to me along with my coach in 1977. They get a 50-50 share of the credit on this.
Yeah, Jesus doesn't have a real good recognition when it comes to fences and boundaries. Yeah. He's when he says all, he really does mean all.
Jesus is a non-denominational Christ. Yeah. Let's just go there with that.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, when he talks about he died for all, he truly died for all. Now, of course, we come on his terms, but okay, we'll let it go at that. So there's a historical reality. The second historical reality that we want to point out is you can go back the entire way to the original day of Pentecost, in the establishment of the Christian church, which is historically acknowledged by everyone in the business of history, and recognize that the attending fruit that comes from true spiritual discipleship, people genuinely following Jesus and living their lives under his direction, results in societal change, first in families, then in local communities, and then outward into cultures. The Roman Empire fell. The church survived and outlasted it, in spite of the fact that the church was its enemy and there were no church buildings for the first 300 years of Christianity because Christianity was illegal. Now, part of the reason that societal change happens is not because Christians desire cultural dominance to please an angry God. That is the farthest thing from the truth. The reality is that when someone truly becomes a disciple of Jesus Christ, he takes the teachings of Jesus seriously, not the least of which is summarized in Christ's statement that we should love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And if we love our neighbor as we love ourselves, we care about whether or not his garbage gets picked up on time. We care about whether or not there's potholes on his street. We care about whether or not he has the ability to exercise his conscience, whether he agrees with Christianity or not, whether he has the right to his personal privacy of conscience, his personal expression of conscience, his free speech, his religious liberty. All the things that enter into the political and the legal realm, we care about because we care about our neighbor. So societal reformation always follows true spiritual renewal.
Don't you
Always.
think you could also add a nuance to it by saying, and you're not threatened by their lack of belief or differences?
Well, that's because Christ requires no compulsion.
Right.
He says, whoever will may come. That's the amazing thing. This is where people get Christianity all wrong. They think that Christians are out recruiting like insurance guys, but that their boss is really mad and they haven't met their numbers. This has nothing to do with that. All right. Christ not only died for all, he rose from the dead.
Where do
all.
Where do you think we get
It's like the contest is over, okay?
Well, no, but I think, there's a great commission. I know I don't know his first name, but Penn and Teller, and I'm talking about Teller. And he always says, what I find most offensive are true believers who don't share what they believe. In other words, if you really believed this, I have more respect for you. If you really believe in heaven and you really believe in hell and you really believe I'm going to hell, I respect you coming to me and warning me. If you knew I was getting on a plane that was going to crash, I wouldn't want you to keep it to yourself and be silent. Love for me would be to tell me, don't get on that plane or go on this other plane. And the Great Commission is to go forth and make disciples of all men. Now, I studied Jesus and I watched Jesus, and he never shoved himself down anyone's throat. Everybody came to him. And I think when Jesus talks about the Great Commission, the reality is people are hurting. And for those that are searching, you're there while they're searching. You're there when they come to you. And you lived a life that would attract them to come to you. And I think when we live in absence of that, I think that's how even believers are tricked into thinking, oh, I got to be an insurance salesman now and schlep this to everybody. No, you need to be sold out to Jesus and allowing him to live through you by his Holy Spirit. That's going to make you look different. You're going to live different. And when people are lost, they're going to come to you. I mean, if I'm having trouble in my marriage, I'm not going to the guy on his fifth marriage.
Well, and this is to not.
So there's a balance to it, too.
Right. And when this is to not diminish insurance agents.
No,
right?
of course not.
All right.
I'm in the bill of getting into a life insurance policy.
Right.
Let's not diminish it.
So we're not, but we could use any sales model there. All right. And I started it, so I want to make sure I get back off of it. Michael, here's where this all wraps back around to the current dilemma that we're in regards to a culture. We have raised our children in two or three generations, for at least two generations now. The message of reality has changed. 100 years ago, if I made the statement in public that we live in a moral universe, everybody would say, well, of course that's true. There's such a thing as right and wrong. We live in a moral universe. Today, that is the first primary contest in regards to all politics and all public policy and all elections, whether or not someone believes that we live in a moral universe. Because when you put a ceiling over the universe and say there is no transcendent truth that can impact us and define our morality, but morality comes from either public opinion polls or the most powerful agencies in power in the state, then what we have is we don't have a transcendent morality. We have a flat earth in which power changes everything. And that's the scary part that we saw in COVID. When push came to shove, government said, you'll do what we say or else. And I think that made a huge impact on the younger generation. They said, oh my gosh, they shut my parents out of work. They shut me out of school. Wait a minute. What is my future? And who do I have to please? And suddenly, I think it's shaken a lot of people up in the realization there's got to be more to life than what the government tells me.
Yeah. And, lies are inevitably solved by truth. Darkness is inevitably cured with light. There's another side of this. I'm watching my daughters, and early on in high school, this friend was bisexual, this friend was transgendered, this friend is gay, and by graduation, the bisexual isn't bisexual anymore, the gay isn't gay anymore, the transgendered is kind of isolated, and they just kind of seen it come and go and not mean anything lasting. And it certainly didn't do anything to inform their purpose and why they exist. And I think that's what's brewing. I think the lies have had their day too, time and the lie being exposed. But where I want to pick up when we come back is I'm seeing a general mistrust with the youth today and distance between trust and authority of older people. The same thing I saw prior to the Jesus movement. And I think that is a real clue as to what's happening. As much as these other things are equal to these other things. They don't discredit everything else that we've talked about. But I think if you're wondering what's going on and why now, it's a key component of that. And that's right where we'll pick it up when we come back. I want to talk to you about United Structural Systems. This has been the go-to company for concrete leveling and lifting, to foundation repair, to waterproofing. And it's been that way for decades. It started with Dad. Son still runs it and runs it just like Dad. Now, they have, just for credibility's sake, over 23,000, not just me, 23,000 100% satisfied residential families in Middle Tennessee. They're A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau. When you start seeing something suspicious, it can be anything from a cracked brick to a bowing basement wall to a leaning chimney, moisture in the crawl space or basement. You pick up the phone, you call USS at 227-2275, and we don't send a salesman. He's not there to find something that we can make money off of. We send a project manager. We're in the problem-solving business, and you'd be surprised what percentage of times there is no problem. It's just a brick. Don't sweat it. That's peace of mind for free. But if it is the beginning early signs of something serious, you want to catch it early while you have options and affordability. And we'll shoot straight with you there. But the inspection, the understanding, the estimate, it's free and no obligation. So what are you seeing? We guarantee our best. Call USS 227-2275, 227-2275, or online at USSTN.com.
Got a crash in the way in Williamson County. It's an overturned vehicle. The right 3 lanes are blocked 65 northbound at McEwen Drive. The potential top pick in the NFL draft is now a wanted man. And closing arguments underway in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. Attorney General Merrick Garland answering questions in our nation's capital. These stories and more at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, David and I are having a fascinating conversation amongst ourselves. It hasn't led to a Mac. What are we calling them now? They're Mac
Talks.
Mac Talks. Hasn't it spurred into a Mac Talk? Brother Ken hasn't chimed in. All right, so here's where I left off. And we ought to do this one time, change it, where you dictate what we talk about, David, instead of me. But we kind of drifted into this conversation, and I want to dust out what I meant. If you go to the climate, the cultural climate prior to the Jesus movement, you had Timothy Leary, you had others. Everything was about checkout, tune in, all this stuff. They turned to wrong things like drugs to try to get to their answers or get closer to a truth. A lot of people really wrestled between Buddhism and at that time they called it Mohammedism. But, Islam and all these other, Eastern mysticism and all these other things. And they got into acid and LSD to try to have outer body experiences. But there was a longing and a searching. And eventually when they cried out to God, the real God, basically, Keith Green would explain it this way. I looked at all these people and nobody had anything bad to say about Jesus. Oh, he was a great prophet. Oh, he was a great teacher. Oh, he was a great guy. But he noticed that Jesus said, I am the only way, truth, and life. He thought, I got to give this Jesus a try, and that's how he found him. But there was a rebellion against, a discrediting against, really traditional older people. It was mainly politically conservative people. It was mainly traditional beliefs like organized religion and materialism, and you graduate, and you get married, and you have a family. That was what they were rebelling against. This time around, it's eerily similar. Older people and people of authority have no credibility. There's a great distance between them and the youth. And when the Jesus movement came, it may have been against conservative parents. This time it might be against woke parents. And I think, again, justification for us having this conversation, you will not find spiritual solutions politically. So Donald Trump isn't going to lead America to spiritual awakening and revival. He's a political person and a political figure. But spiritual movements and awakenings can affect politics. And so that's why I think it's fair game to talk about. And then we also discussed with John Irwin yesterday how interesting all this timing is. Before the movie can even be released, revival starts breaking out on these campuses at these universities. And somehow what was supposed to be Black History Month turned out to be Jesus Month in February. So you have the awakening, or the chosen going on. You have the Jesus Revolution. You have the awakening at these universities, all as the movie comes out to explain it. All this timing can't be a coincidence, is it? Why am I not hearing you, David? Did you hit mute?
No, sir, not me.
Oh, okay.
You there?
Mac hit mute. Okay.
Hey,
go ahead.
Mac.
Not a coincidence, right?
Sorry, DZ.
Speaking of, that's right. Speaking of timing, we got on the news. Can I answer that question on the other side?
All right, that, and I want to get to COVID because it is important that we discuss COVID today. That's all next with David Zanotti on WTN.
11:30 on the dot this Wednesday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Still got that overturned vehicle. Right 3 lanes are blocked. 65 northbound at McEwen Drive in Williamson County. We also have a timeline now for the risk of severe weather. That's going to be a level 2 out of 5 for everyone south of 40, a level 1 out of 5 for everyone north of 40. It looks like Nashville will be under the gun between 7 and 10 o'clock tonight. Full forecast in 2 minutes. The potential top pick in the NFL draft is now a wanted man. Georgia Bulldog Jalen Carter named in arrest warrants, charging him with reckless driving and racing leading up to that crash January 15th that killed a staffer and a teammate. Alex Murdaugh double murder trial closing arguments getting underway after the jury visited the crime scene today. The prominent South Carolina attorney accused of murdering his wife and son. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Yeah, clearly we're boring Mac. Mac is watching a video about how in the mid-'80s they sent wanted, convicted criminals Super Bowl tickets, and then they'd show up for the tickets and they'd arrest them. It was a way to get them out of the bushes.
It's pretty funny.
You did it today, and half the team would show up. You'd have to arrest the team. Sunshine to fair skies, 75 degrees downtown on Super Talk, at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. The market, the Dow's up 46, NASDAQ now down just 30. The S&P is down 80. The market is coming back to flat. It was down triple figures earlier, so that's some good news. Hey, who wouldn't want to be credit card debt free? And what if I said you could get there in 10 days? Your home is your ticket, and Loan Pronto is the place. It's their all-new Express Equity Line of Credit program, and it's just what you need. And interest rates are a lot lower than you think. They're at 5-month lows. You don't have to do a full refi, so you keep that initial mortgage that you may have locked in the 2s for some of you, 3s for others. But you can still tap into the equity of your home. Get that check in your hand and do smart things with it. Pay down those high-interest credit card debts. Maybe make a home improvement. Maybe get back to shopping for a new home. Loan Pronto's Express Equity Line of Credit can close in 7 to 10 days. You get the check in your hand, pay down that high-interest credit card debt. That frees up cash flow for inflation and get you in a recession-proof. And we can get it all done in 7 to 10 days, and 9 out of 10 times we don't even need an appraisal. So what are you waiting for? That financial peace of mind is just around the corner, about 10 days to be exact. Stop the madness and say no to 24% interest fees on credit cards. Call 499-5500 5780 for Loan Pronto today, and check out our HELOC program. 499-5780, 499-5780. Online at loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender at MLS 1661781. Subject to lender approval. I don't know. Today's going by fast, and I'm having a hard time keeping up with my ADD. I think where we left off was David was refusing to answer a direct question till after the news because we were at news time. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is I don't remember what the question was.
I took notes. That's the good news.
Oh, good.
All right. Let's go back and retrace the differential between what we're seeing today and what we saw back in the late 60s, early 70s. We talked about meaninglessness.
Mm-hmm.
You brought that word to the table. When Francis Schaeffer reviewed all of this from watching America from Europe at that time, because that's where he was analyzing what was going on in the United States and youth culture, he saw the sex, drug, and rock and roll hippie movement, the dropout. That preceded the Jesus movement and was a direct reaction to the meaninglessness of a material culture without spiritual value. Because in essence, the World War II generation came back and built a material society and left God largely out of the equation. And so young people coming up were raised in that godless mentality and that godless mindset. Or a hyper-traditional religious morality, which was meaningless to them personally.
Right.
So there was the massive rebellion preceded everything else, and the rebellion was against meaningless. The alternative of that meaninglessness was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So there you had people basically tuning out, divorcing themselves from the older generation, sitting in at colleges and universities, protesting in urban centers, and basically walking away from reality at any level because they just had had enough. Well, when that whole thing finally hit the wall, and then you add the Vietnam War, which was basically to a whole generation of American youth, we're going to get drafted and we're going to go die.
Right.
Suddenly people said being stoned is not the sufficient answer. There's got to be more. And in that moment, people in California began to call out to God, young people. And when they called, God answered.
So
the transformation that they saw began to change culture.
So hippies then, who is it today?
Oh, I think what you see today, the rebellion mechanism back in the 60s was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's still the same. It's sex, drugs, and basically the digital era. It
could be internet sex, internet porn.
Well, it's a medium of distraction added by medication to solve the crying yourself to sleep at night. But eventually, Schaeffer said it best. We live in a moral universe, and we are surrounded by reality. And young people aren't stupid. They're just young, and they figure it out.
But let's talk about the loss of credibility and betrayal. So they're now looking, because everybody forgets when we were young, if the textbook said it, it was real. If the teacher said it, it was real. If Time Magazine and Newsweek said it, it was real. If television and Walter Cronkite said it, it was real. And then suddenly you're going, no, this isn't real. This is a lie, which they're getting now magnified through social media, magnified through death of journalism, magnified by COVID, magnified by their teachers. That's a huge betrayal for them.
Well,
it looks to me, and sometimes I feel like I'm the only one saying this, you don't see, I can tell you, I have kids in sophomore year and 2 in senior year, and I'm telling you from the time they were babies all the way through elementary school, all the way through junior high. Now I'm peddling Jesus and they're not buying. And they found themselves kind of caught in between and double-minded. I'm getting this from home, but I'm getting this from school. And when it was all said and done, I looked at them and said, I got to give this to them. These kids were really looking, thirsting for truth. They were hungry and thirsting for purpose. And now here, right before graduation, a movement begins. And I see that that's the same betrayal, the same distance with adults, and they've lost credibility, same hunger and thirst, they've been lied to, got all the wrong answers. They almost look like they're in the same place as the hippies in 69.
I would say, Michael, that generationally, we're looking at a very similar crisis in youth culture. I would agree completely.
So it shouldn't surprise us if we're seeing. Now, let's not confuse cultural awakening with revival, right? Or are you not on board with that?
Well, I think that first off, revival is, again, it's a term that we're comfortable with as Americans. What revival is basically people coming to their senses and asking God for help. That's what it is. It's not like God suddenly says, I got an idea. I'm just going to pour out this special blessing and make people hungry because I feel like it. It doesn't start there. It starts with people crying out to God. That's the reality, because we discover that we are in a discordant position. And you say, well, that's just because you're scared. Take another toke. You'll be better. You'll turn on another Netflix special. You'll be better. Be distracted. No, there comes a point at which the human spirit cannot be distracted from reality any longer. And when we look up, we find that there is someone there. That's the difference. So we'll see what happens. It is wholly dependent upon the repentant spirit of people in this country and then what they do. Now, there are always people that are prepared to try to capitalize on that and to take people who are just discovering faith the first time through and try to steer them in a different direction.
It was happening during the Jesus movement.
Yeah. Yes, and we witnessed it, we saw it, we realized it. But one of the great things that attended the Jesus movement was also the distribution of the Bible. At that period of time, it was called The Way. It was the Living Bible came out in that period of time. Now, again, that's not a it's not a translation. It's a paraphrase. It's not in vogue today. I understand all that. But then it was in multiple millions of copies being distributed. So young people began to embrace Christianity as following the way, not the cult, but the book. The book was the Bible.
Right.
And just the cover they used.
Please make that clear, because there was the New Age movement. There was a cult, the way too. Yeah.
Right. But the title of those Living Bibles came out in paperback edition. And I will tell you that when I got my first one of those, I read it 3 times the first week, the whole thing. Yeah. Right. It was first was the New Testament. Then when I got the New Testament, the Old Testament, I started to read again because I had never read the Bible before. And there was a tremendous hunger. And therein is the discipleship mechanism that begins to kick in. And then there were a large number of churches who decided to forsake the tradition,
formalities.
And yes. And say, I mean, I can remember the church that I first walked into with my buddies at that period of time. I will tell you, we were a scene to see. The group came in, there was at least a dozen of us, barefoot or sandals, ripped jeans, American flags sewn on our back pockets for a reason, a hair down to the shoulders and then some, and the smell wasn't great. Walked in, came in and sat down in the front row of this little church, this little evangelical church. We were literally watching elders fall out into the aisle as we were walking in.
Well, then you're going to love the movie Jesus Revolution, because I lived that too. And by the way,
really happened.
And coming from Catholic childhoods that was so formal and so reverent, that actually was enticing to us. Man, we can just talk about Jesus and wear what we're wearing, that kind of thing.
And we saw this going on all over the country, and we witnessed it with our eyes, and it was amazing. But again, I can tell you that the genuineness of changed lives, I still get letters and calls and follow up from people from those days who have gone on to 50 years later to be genuinely productive humans who love their neighbor and love their kids, and not perfect people. We all fall down, but what happened to them was real, and it didn't stop.
May I add that when you go see the Jesus Revolution, you're going to have some time travel that is going to be eerie for you. Let's turn to this headline.
No cell phones, huh?
Yeah, no, I didn't look at my cell phone during the movie. Credibility crisis is the Fox headline. New York Times helped mislead America over COVID lab leak theory. Now, do I, reading this story by Brian Floyd from start to finish, agree with him? Of course. Were they guilty? Yes. But are you kidding me? We think the credibility crisis is limited to the New York Times? And what did you expect from death of journalism? How about to the office of the presidency? How about to governor's mansions? How about to the CDC? How about to the World Health Organization? How about to your local doctor, let alone prevailing hospital chains? I mean, David, come on. Are we really going to just look at this latest revelation from the Biden administration and say, this proves it, we're all vindicated? By the way, I was alive and well and watched 9 out of 10 of you duped along with them all. So, I mean, how do I responsibly handle this whole new movement of understanding towards COVID? You mean just now you're getting to China and the lab leak? How about ask the question, what were they doing all along and why? How about why were we helping them? How was the guy helping them our authority to protect us? Or how about even better yet, why are we doing gain of function right now within our borders? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound like somebody that can't be reached and blessed by awakening, but this is a pretty limited awakening.
I don't think there's any question that when you talk to people across the entire country, they know they were lied to. They know it. And at some level, they know it, and it was across the board. Now, most people are very generous in regards to goodwill, saying, okay, in the beginning, people panicked because they were afraid for good reason and purpose, and we gave them that. But it began, Michael, once we began to uncover very early that the models were fabricated by design. And it has been an unfolding ever since, and it is at every single level. And if they're not willing to admit the knowledge that they know in their heart that they were lied to, they just stay quiet. Okay, so we got fooled. We got fooled by people in power. The question is, what do you do about that? Now, some people are going to be very quick to say we're going to demand accountability, blah, 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 blah. You know, going backwards is probably not going to fix or help anything. The danger is going forward. And what you've intimated is quite true. There are people who are as deeply committed to their worldview today as they were then and hate anyone who gets in their way as much today or more than they did then.
I was going to say more.
Right. And so what we have to watch out for is what we discovered is there was a cultural elite group of people in medicine and politics and academia who intentionally
took advantage of it.
This goodwill of the people to their advantage. And in big pharma, hopefully we will never let ourselves be taken advantage of that way again. But we know in the technological society that we live in, you don't get a lot of second chances to gain the ground back that's been taken from you. And that's why we've got to be really careful. Now, you've been saying for a long time that if you put these dots together, their next play is global warming.
No, wait a minute. Let me rephrase that. Their first play was global warming.
Right.
Their second play was COVID, and they were shocked you did for COVID what they couldn't get you to do for global warming.
But
and now, after COVID, they want you to continue with the fear and control and do it again for global warming.
And here's a story that I'm not sure, I haven't been able to listen every day. I'm not sure you covered it yet. And I didn't, I don't know if you even said
I just got the ratings. There's a lot of people not listening every day.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to throw that in.
Come on, we'll get there. All right, we'll get there. Tell a friend. The point of as you're making right now is if you go on your Apple iPhone, if you've got one, and you look under battery care,
they're doing the power saving.
Exactly what we're talking about. Remember, Apple was traipsing right along the COVID line to start tracking everybody. They got caught and they suddenly became a privacy company again. But now what they're basically saying is, we'll tell you when you can charge your phone and when you can't based upon our understanding of carbon emissions. Now, can you imagine the audacity of telling somebody that's spending all this money on a monthly basis and for the technology saying, we'll let you know when you're allowed to have a phone charge.
Let me ask you, what was scarier, that they were doing it or how long they were doing it before it became
anybody
was
knew.
Aware? Yeah.
Yep.
That's
and then the next course of step is, what will they do next? Will they next decide, which we could see coming, that they'll use your phone to report your location to government officials if you're going somewhere where people have decided that's just not right, or you're overusing your carbon credits. Look, this is creepy stuff. And the truth of the matter is, those people at the top, they haven't changed. That's why we got to change the people at the top.
And another virus could come. And so even though now they're saying, well,
we got one. The planet has a fever, Michael.
Well, yeah. But you know what I'm saying is that, you could have a virus come again. Mm-hmm. And they'll come around with masks again. They'll come around with limited shelter in place or school from home. I mean, some of this stuff has to be addressed so that it never happens again as best you can. I mean, this elite group is never going to be satisfied until they control everyone and everything, right?
That's why we need revival.
At ease, my friend. Sorry for all the overtime. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, my gosh, it's happening.
I'm dabbing him. I don't have Ken to tell me, but I'm dabbing. Cool wipes.
For it shall be. On the soil of the mouse, that the lefty with the new irons shall slay the mentor. Oh, Dad, are you proud of me yet?
Keep dabbing.
Oh,
keep dabbing.
my goodness.
What happened?
This is it.
What did I say?
This is the trash talk that I've been hearing about going on about
totally blacked out. What did I say? I think it had something to do with I'm going to come to Florida and beat you with my new golf clubs.
Here we go. Here we go.
I knew that was coming.
I had been getting reports from people listening around the country that you were trash talking me about golf again, and I hadn't heard it. So now I know.
As you know,
now you've got a whole shtick. I've become a segment now.
As you know, my friend and mentor abandons me for months at a time. And when he does, I turn to golf lessons and videos, and then I turn to buying new irons, and I feel a call to Southwest coming. And although I will say this, there's one state I play terrible in, and it's Florida. I don't know if the grass down there throws me off.
Mac, what we should do is we should cover it live. We should cover it live. Just do a show.
Or maybe I'd
course,
feel better if I flew you in and we played at the bridge or somewhere I'm comfortable with. But
no, let's just do it right from the course. It would be great.
This will be Michael by like hole 13.
Get him out.
Get him out.
Don't give him that coat.
Walk him along the alligators with his dog. And then I'll have Joe Vig there to tell you, David, I don't want to say anything, but you're insulting me and you're embarrassing yourself where Michael's playing against you. Thanks for the overtime. God bless you. I've missed you.
Thank you, Michael.
David, tonight you can hear his great work on the Public Square Sunday mornings on WTN, 200 stations nationwide and on demand anytime at thepublicsquare.com. I want to talk to you, if I can, about pain. It could be neck pain, could be knee pain, could be hip pain, could be elbow pain. Pain. The kind of pain we battle all day. And that's even if it lets the day end and allows us to sleep. And then we wake up the next morning and it's waiting for us. Never mind the things we used to do and love that made us happy. Well, at the Dr. Gill Center in Franklin, we've been treating pain for over 30 years. We've done 500,000 procedures, treated over 27,000 people. And we've allowed people to get to pain-free living, back to doing the things they love without needles, without downtime. Now, spinal decompression therapy is one of the big game changers. That was separation without a scalpel. But we also have red light laser therapy, our class 5 lasers. I mean, state-of-the-art equipment that the industry is using. And so we're more than just chiropractic care, and chiropractic care works. But I always say it this way. I still think the Dr. Gill Center is your best bet at pain-free living and avoiding surgery, but it's still your best first step, even if it ends up in surgery, because $23 covers everything. Your extensive exam, any and all x-rays and imaging, and your accurate diagnosis. No one can treat you till you're diagnosed. So don't do nothing. Don't settle for a pill. Call the Dr. Gill Center. Take advantage of our $23 new patient appointment. We have a new phone number, 882-4838, 882-4838, 882-4838, or online at callmepainfree.com. 11:57, about 5 seconds till 11:58, which means 2-minute warning till the Matt Murphy Show. I got a text back at 9:20. Matthew 7:15 through 30. Your true fruit is showing, and it isn't pretty. First of all, I never claimed to be a prophet, let alone to have you call me a false prophet. Second of all, I was just talking about I think at 9:20 we were talking about Biden's strange description
we were
of
talking
his nurse.
about the nurse. Yeah.
And then I told a terrible nurse story I had, which was an ultrasound.
We talked about shank shoe.
In a paper napkin. I mean, I am a human being in the flesh. That wasn't even an issue of a temptation. It was just an issue of not wanting something embarrassing. I still have a body that has embarrassing body functions or anxiety. What does that have to do with being a false prophet? I'll tell you, the more I always say, the more I know people, the more I love animals. Then I used to say, and I rebuked myself, and I don't say it anymore, the more I know Christians, the more I know Jesus, the more I don't love Christians. And that's really a false statement based on a few. But the more I stare at the super text line, the more I don't like it. I can't keep up with you people, and they're just ridiculous attacks. Television tonight, I'd turn it off if I were you. Masked Singer, are we still doing that?
Blue Bloods.
Goldberg's Survivor premiere? What is that, like the 58th season of Survivor? Turn the TV off. Spend some time with your family. Or watch some sports. I'll let you guys figure that out. Whatever you do, stick around. The Matt Murphy Show's next. I'll see you in the morning at 9.